Hello and welcome to this end of session roundup with your AWC legislative team. I'm Candace Bach, Government Relations Director, and I'm joined by AWC's lobbyist crew.
I'm Carl Schrader, I'm the Deputy Director.
I'm Brandy DeLange, I'm one of the Government Relations Advocates.
And I'm Lindsay Hewer, I'm the last Government Relations Advocate.
So we are almost done. This short 2024 legislative session is in its final days. So it's a good time to contemplate how it's been going and some overall themes, and then look ahead a little bit to what we can plan for in 2025. So what are maybe some highlights so far as we're wrapping up the 60 days?
We have a great highlight. Recently, one of our priorities passed off the Senate floor and is on its way to the governor. So allowing for co-responders to have some liability protection. So as our cities adopt co-responder programs, that we make sure that we're doing everything we can to make those work for our cities.
Nice. That's a great highlight. And it sort of points to sometimes in a short session, it's not the big bills that end up being the highlights. It's sometimes it's those things that fly under the radar that are important but aren't on the front page that can be the highlights.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly think that a lot of baby steps, a lot of little steps. I think if we're seeing anything big, it's a preview. Those things have, fallen by the wayside during the session, but they will probably come back in 2025. So as is typical with a short session, we're seeing incremental progress in a number of different areas, but we're seeing some previews of the big things that we'll be looking out for next year.
Yeah, this feels a little bit more like a traditional short session to me than we've experienced in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, similar to what Lindsay said, some of the bigger issues that I was working on this year, transit-oriented development, the producer responsibility for packaging, very heavy lifts, one that we weren't really involved in, but rental stability as well. And the legislature so far hasn't been able to pass very many of those, marquee kind of items. And like you said, that's more traditional for a short session where there really isn't enough time to get those heavy policies done a lot of the time.
Right. I know Brandy's first short session with us, we told her it would be low key. And
so this is certainly a whole new experience for me. My short session, obviously, we passed a transportation package, but this year has been way more slow, and at least it seems to be in line with what I typically have heard around a short session. I will say we still have one large policy bill in the transportation sector still hanging out there around traffic safety cameras. And I think that'll probably go until the very last minute. But generally speaking, in the transportation budget arena, it's a pretty quiet period of time. I think legislators are already starting to gear up for the 25 session, where I would expect a transportation package to happen.
We were talking a little bit before we started about just overall themes, and one of them around communications, stakeholder outreach. There was definitely some grumbling about maybe that's not happening as much as it used to, particularly before the pandemic. And I feel like that was certainly the case on a number of things I was working on, that there wasn't a lot of proactive outreach, and it took a while to pull people together.
Yeah, I mean, definitely over the course of the time that I've been doing this, we're at a kind of low point in the amount of bringing everybody around the table, going line by line, folks who disagree being in the same room. It's become much more of like a game of telephone, where individual organizations talk to legislators who talk to other organizations who talk to other legislators. And it's kind of, I think the pandemic really accelerated it at a minimum. And I don't think it's good for policy development. It's, you end up with a product that's not as refined.
I would say I agree. I think we were really fortunate this year. We had a few bills that actually wound up not making it past cutoff because of the lack of stakeholdering. But that was explicitly said that, without stakeholdering the legislation, there just was no path forward. And so I think the advocates finally recognized that reaching out and having those conversations early really is kind of key in ensuring that their priority actually makes it to the finish line.
I think we're just seeing a number of new faces from pre-pandemic, a number of new legislators, and the lack of stakeholdering isn't really isolated to one issue area or one chamber or anything. It's House members aren't talking to each other in both caucuses. Senate members aren't talking to each other. House and Senate aren't talking to each other. The stakeholder groups aren't working together. And I'm even seeing some issues in my issue area, particularly in behavioral health, that we have new stakeholder groups that are coming in, and there's new sort of turf wars that are emerging that didn't exist 4, 5, 6 years ago because the behavioral health field is evolving. And I think that those are really important areas where we get in and we can kind of be the bridge and connect those dots. But it's also hard, as you were saying, to be that sort of center of the telephone hub. It'd be nice to get everybody in a room and working together. And I don't know what it's going to take for the legislature to get there. It certainly wasn't this year, but hopefully in 2025, although we'll have a new slew of
I was just going to say
folks.
We'll be starting over, and maybe part of what it takes is having us and our members do that early reach out to say, hey, you're new on the block here, but we would love to sit down with you and share our priorities and share where cities should be, and really kind of just start to build the relationship early.
I think it's one of the things AWC is kind of known for and respected for, is like being willing to reach out, to bring people together, to listen. So I do think we have our work cut out for us as we head into this long interim. With the short session, that means a longer interim. Also, of course, the campaign season. But what would you maybe tell our members as they are preparing, or maybe not preparing? How can they get prepared to be effective in this long interim and going into 2025?
Yeah, I certainly think echoing, what Brandy said in terms of reaching out to your legislators, you're going to start to see, if you haven't already, retirements be announced and new folks coming in. And so reach out to them during the summer. But I wouldn't stop with just your state legislators. Certainly reach out amongst all of your local government partners in your community, and then all of your various stakeholders. Again, just talking about the behavioral health realm, we've found that where our cities work with their nonprofit local providers, that they have a better understanding of what that work that's going on. And then when they talk to their legislators, they're all kind of speaking from the same, sheet, if you will. And so when you do that, you can amplify that message. And then if all this kind of cities in a region come together and are speaking on that, that's really powerful and has been really helpful this session.
Yeah, Carl, I know in your arena around land use and housing, there's been a lot of desire for Olympia to take action. And we've been talking about the importance of community-based decisions and trusting local elected officials.
Yeah.
What would you say in terms of that for our members?
Yeah, it's definitely been a theme on the land use and housing space over the last several years, this kind of reimagining of what the state role and the local role is. And frankly, from where I sit, a feeling of the trust level kind of diminishing between the state and local governments. And I think it's really important over the interim and just, every day as we're continuing this relationship, that it's on our members to reach out to the legislators and talk to them about the challenges that they're dealing with in their communities, the balancing decisions that are being made, and the true efforts to do good by the community and to improve the situation on the ground that the legislature is trying to respond to as well. And we need to rebuild that trust to be an effective state. And so we just need to work at it, I think would be my advice.
I think to underscore that point, it's reminding legislators, and we say this consistently, but reminding legislators that our local electeds, our city council members and mayors are working towards the same goals as legislators, which is to serve their communities in the best way possible. And being able to kind of get back out there and remind them of that shared goal, I think is really important.
Yeah, and with that, I'd like to say thank you to this team who's done amazing work over the last nearly 60 days. And thanks to all of our members who've been engaged all session long. Look for those opportunities over the interim to be out talking to your legislators, talking to legislative candidates about what's important to your community. And we'll have lots of opportunities over the interim for you to check in with us as well. So thanks. Happy end of the 2024 session, and we'll look forward to 2025.